They say the Ark of the Covenant was not just built, it was commanded into existence. A golden chest, shaped to divine specifications, capable of holding the very voice of God. For centuries, its story has lingered like a holy shadow, half myth, half memory, feared by those who believe, dismissed by those who dare to doubt, yet across history the same strange pattern emerges. Wherever the Ark appears, people die, cities crumble, and armies fall, and wherever it vanishes, so does truth itself. The Bible describes the Ark as a simple container, made of acacia wood lined inside and out with pure gold, crowned with 2 cherubim, whose wings meet over an empty space called the mercy seat. But the ancient texts don't describe reverence, they describe fear. When the Israelites carried it into battle, their enemies trembled, not because it was a symbol, but because it was a force, a terrible, radiant force. Some accounts speak of lightning flashing between the cherubim, of voices echoing without a source, of men struck dead for touching its side. For generations, theologians have said these are miracles or punishments from heaven. But what if they were something else? What if the Ark was not simply holy but powerful? In the deserts of Sinai, where Moses first received its blueprints, the Ark was said to glow at night, resting beneath a column of fire. The people followed it, guided by that light. Imagine standing there, a nomadic tribe, no tools, no science, no words for what you see. Just a box that burns without burning, that hums without wind, that kills without striking. To them, it would be God. To us, it might be something else entirely. For centuries, the Ark remained the center of Israelite life. When it moved, they moved. When it stopped, they stopped. It wasn't kept in temples or towers. It was the temple, the direct link between heaven and earth. And yet, that link came with rules. Only one man could approach it, only after purification, only on a single day each year. Anyone else who tried, anyone who even looked upon it the wrong way, risked instant death. Some scholars call these spiritual metaphors, others whisper of radiation burns. Ancient priests may have worn special garments, not for ceremony, but for protection. The Ark's warnings sound eerily like instructions for handling something volatile, something dangerous. When the Philistines once captured the Ark, their victory turned to horror. The city that held it was struck with sickness, tumors, and death. Within days, they begged to give it back. Could that have been divine wrath or exposure to an energy they couldn't comprehend? Even the Bible's translators struggled to describe it. The Hebrew word used for its power, Shekinah, means the presence, a glowing essence, both divine and destructive, a presence that could level walls, ignite stone, and silence the unworthy, and yet, despite its terror, kings and conquerors sought it. David danced before it. Solomon built a temple around it. Empires fell trying to possess it. Because the Ark represented more than faith, it represented dominion. To control it was to control God's favor, or perhaps something far older. Could it be that behind the veil of worship, ancient rulers guarded a machine? A device so potent that they wrapped it in holiness just to keep it safe? Historians have long dismissed this idea as pseudoscience, an anachronism forced onto sacred myth. But even skeptics admit the Ark doesn't behave like a relic, it behaves like a weapon. Every story tied to it follows a pattern of energy, of resonance, of unexplainable destruction, and those who got too close paid with their lives. As centuries passed, the Ark disappeared again and again. Each time it returned, it changed the course of history, but eventually it vanished for good. Some say it was hidden beneath Jerusalem before the Babylonians arrived. Others claim it was taken by Solomon's bloodline to Ethiopia, and still others believe it was buried beneath the sands of Egypt, guarded by those who feared what it could unleash. No matter the theory, one thing is constant. Someone always tried to hide it. Someone always wanted to keep its secret. Today, the Ark remains a paradox, both divine and technological, sacred and forbidden. Perhaps it was never meant to be understood, only contained. But still, one haunting question lingers, echoing through every ruined temple and sealed archive. What if this ancient chest was never a metaphor for God's power, but the power itself? Because if even a fragment of that force still exists somewhere beneath the earth or locked within a forgotten vault, then the greatest secret in human history may not be lost at all, may simply be waiting for someone reckless enough to open it again. The air over Axum hangs heavy with dust and incense, a blend of sunlight and sanctity that seems unchanged for centuries. Here, in the highlands of northern Ethiopia, time feels reluctant to move. Narrow streets wind toward a small stone compound surrounded by iron gates and silence. The Chapel of the Tablet, part of the ancient church of St. Mary of Zion. It's here, local monks say, that the Ark of the Covenant rests, not as legend, not as symbol, but as fact. It began, as such discoveries often do, with a whisper. In the late 20th century, a small group of European researchers and journalists traveled to Axum to investigate rumors long dismissed as folklore. The town was remote, its priests reclusive. Yet everywhere the team went, the same story was told in hushed tones. The Ark is here, hidden in a chamber guarded by a single monk who is never allowed to leave. They said the guardian lives and dies within the chapel walls, his only duty to watch over the relic, said to contain the power of God. The lead explorer, a veteran of archaeological expeditions across the Middle East, described the journey in his notes. The people believe utterly, not with mythic reverence, but with practical certainty, as if they could point to the exact stone under which God sleeps. For days they attempted to gain access, speaking through interpreters, requesting interviews, offering donations. At first, the priests were polite, then they grew distant, and then they became afraid. On the fifth day, something changed. Late in the afternoon, as the sun bled into the hills, one of the younger monks approached the team quietly and motioned for them to follow. He led them behind the chapel, through an alley that smelled of smoke and prayer, toward a small, locked door. He said nothing, only pointed at the door and crossed himself. Then he walked away. What happened next remains one of the strangest encounters in modern biblical archaeology. The team began to film, documenting the exterior of the chapel, noting strange symbols etched into the masonry, stars, crosses, and what looked like the stylized wings of cherubim. Then, without warning, a group of armed guards appeared. Not soldiers, not police. Men in civilian clothes carrying old rifles. They shouted in Amharic, ordering the cameras down. When the researchers hesitated, the guards aimed their weapons directly at them. The lead explorer tried to explain, but the priest behind the guards spoke in a voice that left no room for discussion. "Leave this place. The Ark is not for you." The footage ended there. No one was injured, and the team withdrew to their hotel under escort. By dawn, they were gone from Axum. Their official statement later claimed that they encountered unexpected restrictions from the church authorities. But privately, several members confessed something else, that they had seen a faint golden glow through a vent in the chapel wall, a light that flickered and then pulsed as though alive. Skeptics have dismissed the account as dramatization, another addition to the endless chain of Ark legends. Yet the incident was confirmed by multiple witnesses, including locals who watched from a distance. Some say the guards belong to Ethiopia's ecclesiastical police, a secretive force tasked with protecting religious relics. Others claim they were sent by higher powers, the government, the Vatican, perhaps even foreign intelligence agencies aware of what might truly rest inside that chapel. Whatever the truth, one fact stands unchallenged. Since that day, no foreign researcher has been allowed within 20 feet of the chapel of the tablet. Attempts to approach are blocked. Photography is forbidden. The guardian priest, an elderly man, known only as Abba Gebre, is said to weep when asked about his charge. "It burns," he once told a journalist through tears. "It is holy fire. If you saw it, you would not live." Even more unsettling are the reports that followed. Travelers in Axum have spoken of strange sounds emanating from the chapel at night. Low humming, like distant thunder. Some claim that during storms, lightning strikes the building with uncanny precision again and again, as if drawn to it. Engineers have proposed that the structure might be built over a magnetic anomaly. The priests, however, insist it is divine energy, the same power that once leveled Jericho and split the Jordan. And so the question deepens. Why would armed men guard an empty legend? Why risk their lives, their faith, their freedom for a relic that official history says does not exist? What lies inside that chamber, a box of gold, a sacred illusion, or something far beyond human comprehension? In a world obsessed with proof, the Ark of the Covenant remains the one mystery that resists it. Every attempt to uncover it ends the same way: silence, denial, or the quiet click of a locked door. And in Axum, that door still stands. Behind it, perhaps the most dangerous artifact on Earth continues to hum softly in the dark, because when the last team tried to see for themselves, when science came too close to faith, the priests stopped them at gunpoint. For most of us, the story of the Ark of the Covenant begins in Sunday school, painted in warm tones of reverence and faith. A divine box, handcrafted by the prophet Moses under direct instruction from God himself. It was to be a dwelling place, a bridge between heaven and earth, built to contain the stone tablets of the Ten Commandments. In the book of Exodus, the instructions are meticulous. Acacia wood, 2.5 cubits long, overlaid with pure gold, adorned with cherubim whose wings would meet in the center. Above that space, God would appear as a cloud or a beam of light, speaking to his people. It's a beautiful story, structured like divine architecture, but as always, the beauty hides the danger. Because from the moment the ark was completed, it began to act not as a symbol of peace, but as a weapon of unimaginable force. The Israelites carried it before them as they wandered through the desert, and according to Scripture, it unleashed fire upon their enemies, split rivers, and brought plagues to those who defied it. This was no passive artifact of worship. It was a living presence, capable of both mercy and destruction. The ark's journey reads like the biography of a god. From Mount Sinai to the wilderness of Paran, through the battles of Canaan, it became the heart of Israel's identity. It was carried across the Jordan River, which miraculously parted when the priest's feet touched the water, and into Jericho, where its power supposedly brought down the city's walls. The Old Testament describes the scene in tones of triumph and awe, but between the lines, a darker narrative hums. The ark's power was unpredictable, uncontrollable. When a man named Uzzah reached out to steady it as it wobbled on its cart, he fell dead instantly. King David himself trembled with fear afterward, calling it the terror of the Lord. Yet the Bible tells a story with a certain rhythm, as if repeating an old pattern. Faith rewarded, disobedience punished, mystery concealed. The ark was both protector and executioner, a paradox made of gold. Eventually, King Solomon placed it in the first temple of Jerusalem, in the innermost chamber known as the Holy of Holies. There it rested, unseen by human eyes, visited only by the high priest once a year during Yom Kippur. And then it vanished. The disappearance of the ark is one of Scripture's most unsettling silences. No verse describes its destruction or capture. When the Babylonians sacked Jerusalem in 586 BCE, they recorded the treasures they looted, but not the ark. It is simply gone. Historians, theologians, and archaeologists alike have searched for centuries to fill that gap. Some claim the priests hid it beneath the Temple Mount before the invasion. Others insist it was carried to Egypt for safekeeping. A few point to Ethiopia, where ancient texts, the Kebra Nagast, claim Solomon's son smuggled it away. But the deeper one looks, the more the story frays. Archaeologists have long noted that the descriptions of the ark's power, lightning, noise, lethal radiation, sound eerily physical, not spiritual. Some ancient sources outside the Bible describe the ark as emitting a strange glow or breath, something capable of burning flesh. The Jewish historian Josephus wrote that it was not lawful for anyone to touch or even to look upon it, and that its keepers wore protective garments. Is this divine law or safety protocol? Then there's the question of timing. The ark appears suddenly in the biblical timeline, fully formed, its purpose clear, its design unlike anything else of the period. No prototypes, no cultural precedent, no evolution of idea. It is as if it materialized from nowhere, with technology and craftsmanship beyond what nomadic tribes could reasonably achieve. Scholars have tried to reconcile this with Egyptian goldsmithing or Mesopotamian influence, but nothing quite fits. In the broader archaeological record, there is a conspicuous absence. No fragments, no depictions, no relics. Resembling the ark, it exists only in texts, as if deliberately erased from the physical world. That's the paradox. We have a detailed blueprint for something that officially never existed. The Bible gives us measurements, materials, rituals, everything but evidence. And yet generations of priests, kings, and soldiers built their lives and empires around it. How can something so precise, so central, leave no trace at all? Perhaps that's the point. The story we're told, the comforting, contained narrative of a golden chest holding divine commandments, may have been only the safe version. A version the ancient scribes could share without revealing what the ark truly was. Because if even part of the rumors are true, if the ark was more than a vessel for stone tablets, if it generated real energy, or if it carried technology beyond human comprehension, then its disappearance wasn't a mystery, it was a cover-up. And the silence of Scripture wasn't forgetfulness, it was protection. The Bible gives us the version humanity was allowed to know. What it doesn't say may be the part no one was ever meant to read. According to the book of Exodus, the voice of God didn't just issue commandments, it delivered technical instructions. In the shadow of Mount Sinai, Moses is said to have received a detailed set of blueprints, not for a temple or a monument, but for something far more specific. A box, 2.5 cubits long, 1.5 wide, 1.5 high, roughly 4 feet by 2 by 2. It was to be built of acacia wood, overlaid with pure gold, both inside and out, crowned with a lid of solid gold known as the mercy seat. On that lid, two golden cherubim would face each other, their wings touching over an empty space, the meeting point between the divine and the human. At first glance, it sounds ceremonial, like the product of devotion rather than design. But the closer you look, the stranger it becomes. Why such precision? Why specify double layers of conductive metal enclosing an insulating core of wood? Why demand gold, a metal known not for its beauty in antiquity, but for its unmatched conductivity and resistance to corrosion? To a modern engineer, the Ark specifications read less like a religious artifact and more like a device, a carefully insulated container designed to store and channel immense energy. Ancient Hebrew texts describe it as constantly surrounded by a visible aura, a radiant glory that shimmered like fire. When carried into battle, it produced sound, light, and heat. When it rested in the tabernacle, it required a veil to shield others from its brilliance. Could it be that the ark was designed not only to house the Ten Commandments, but to contain something that generated power, something Moses was taught to construct under instruction from a being he believed was divine? The instructions given to Moses came amid thunder, lightning, and clouds, phenomena that many interpret as the physical manifestation of God. But to others, the description sounds like a technological encounter: blinding light, roaring noise, and the transmission of knowledge from an otherworldly source. The ark, they suggest, was not just an object of faith, it was a technological artifact meant to harness or contain an energy source incomprehensible to its builders. Even its components raise questions. Acacia wood was not chosen at random. It's one of the hardest and most durable materials available in the Sinai region, resistant to rot and insects. Layering it with gold would have created a natural capacitor capable of storing electrical charge. Inside, the tablets of stone might have been made of a crystalline substance, further enhancing the ark's capacity to generate or focus energy. Every part of its construction seems purposeful, as though someone, somewhere, understood principles of electromagnetism thousands of years before their discovery. Then, there's the design of the cherubim, often depicted as decorative, yet always described as facing each other, wings outstretched, forming a cavity between them. Biblical scholars translate that empty space as the seat of God's presence, the location from which his voice was heard. But the physical layout mirrors the configuration of electrical terminals, two conductive surfaces facing one another across a gap. When a voltage passes between them, an arc forms, and an arc in ancient Hebrew was sometimes called kavod, the same word used for glory. Could this be coincidence? Or were the ancients describing a literal arc of energy, a luminous discharge bridging the wings of gold? Even the rituals surrounding the ark reinforce this possibility. Only certain priests could approach it, wearing specific garments woven with gold threads, garments that could act as rudimentary Faraday protection. The ark was transported on wooden poles rather than touched directly, as if to avoid grounding an electrical charge. When Uzzah reached out his hand to steady it and fell dead instantly, the priests said, "God struck him." But to a physicist, it sounds like electrocution. What, then, did Moses encounter on Sinai? A deity giving moral law, or an intelligence sharing knowledge wrapped in sacred imagery? If one strips away the divine context, the ark resembles the kind of machine that would have been impossible for Bronze Age humans to invent alone. Perhaps that's why the biblical language blurs so easily between wonder and warning. The Israelites saw the ark as holy because they could not explain it. And maybe Moses never fully understood it either. He only knew that it worked, that it responded, that it was dangerous. Across the ages, theologians have spoken of the ark as a symbol of covenant, a promise between God and his people. But what if it was more literal than that? An actual conduit, a physical bridge designed to communicate or transfer power between two worlds? If so, the divine blueprints Moses received on Sinai were not allegory, they were specifications. The question is, for what? Because if the ark's design was indeed a machine schematic, its purpose may not have been worship at all. It may have been control. Throughout the Old Testament, the Ark of the Covenant behaves less like an object of faith and more like a live reactor. It kills instantly, emits light, and produces heat without flame. It hums, it shocks, it radiates. In one story, a man named Uzzah tries to steady the ark as it begins to slip from its cart. The instant his hand touches the golden surface, he collapses, lifeless. The text attributes his death to divine wrath. He dared to touch what was holy. But even the priests who carried it seem to have known that holiness was not just spiritual, it was physical, dangerous, and somehow measurable. If you strip the event of theology, what remains looks eerily familiar. A fatal jolt of electricity. The ark, lined inside and out with gold and separated by an insulating core of acacia wood, mirrors the structure of a modern capacitor, a device that stores electrical charge. In theory, such a design could accumulate static energy, especially in the dry, charged climate of the Sinai Desert. When Uzzah touched it, he may have completed the circuit, grounding the current through his body. To the ancients, that sudden, invisible power would have seemed supernatural, a direct touch from the hand of God. To us, it would look like electrocution. But the legends go further. The ark was said to produce a mysterious glow, to generate flashes of fire that could burn or blind, and to be carried by priests who sometimes fell ill after long exposure. These details, scattered across centuries of oral and written tradition, suggest something more complex than simple static discharge. Some researchers have compared the descriptions to radiation exposure, skin burns, hair loss, fatigue, even sudden death. Could the ark have emitted ionizing energy like a primitive nuclear or radioactive source? It sounds impossible, and yet so does the rest of the ark's story. Consider the instructions surrounding its handling. The priests who tended the ark wore special garments, not decorative robes, but layered fabrics interwoven with gold thread. Gold conducts electricity and can reflect radiation. The ark was always covered by thick veils of animal skins and linen, perhaps to block more than light, and the priests never touched it directly. They carried it with long poles, avoiding physical contact at all costs. Every safety rule reads like an ancient manual for dealing with something volatile. Even the effects described in nearby communities echo the symptoms of contamination. When the Philistines captured the ark and brought it to Ashdod, their city was struck by an outbreak of tumors and plague. Entire populations fell sick until the ark was sent away. Traditional scholars interpret this as divine punishment, but the text never mentions pestilence before the ark arrived, only after. In modern terms, it could resemble mass radiation poisoning or exposure to some form of toxic energy. Of course, that idea borders on heresy, and that's exactly why it endures. Religion explains the ark's fury as holiness. Science sees potential energy, resonance, or radiation. Both agree on one thing: Contact means death. Across multiple accounts, the ark emits fire without consuming, light without heat, and noise without wind, all hallmarks of intense electrical discharge or plasma. In the language of faith, this is the glory of God. In the language of physics, it's a field effect, the visible corona of ionized air surrounding a highly charged object. The ancients didn't have that vocabulary, so they called it by the only name that made sense: the presence of the Lord. Even the term Ark of the Covenant hides a double meaning. In Hebrew, the word Aaron means chest or container, but also source or generator. What if the ark's holiness was simply the ancient attempt to describe the unseen, deadly force it contained? What if its miracles were side effects of a misunderstood technology, one capable of generating both awe and annihilation? Skeptics argue that the ark's power is purely metaphorical, that stories of lightning, radiation, and fire are exaggerations. Yet from ancient Egypt to Mesopotamia, other texts mention sacred objects that glowed, buzzed, or struck down the unworthy. The Sumerians spoke of tablets that burned to the touch. The Egyptians described a radiant stone within their temples that had to be shielded from sight. Are these merely myths repeating themselves, or fragmented memories of lost science recast through the language of gods? The idea that the ark was technological doesn't diminish its mystery, it deepens it, because if the Israelites were operating something that behaved like a generator, they did so without understanding how or why it worked. They treated it with reverence, fear, and ritual because those were the only tools they had. The priests' prayers may have been less about worship and more about survival. Perhaps in their own way, they learned the same truth that modern scientists rediscovered millennia later. Energy is divine because it creates and destroys, it illuminates, and it kills. The ancients called it the fire of God. We call it electricity. Among all the tribes of Israel, only one was chosen to approach the ark, the Levites. They were the keepers of rituals, the stewards of sacred law, and perhaps the guardians of something far more dangerous than faith alone. Scripture presents this exclusivity as divine decree. The Levites were set apart to minister to the Lord. But beneath the language of sanctity lies something colder, more deliberate, a system of containment. If the ark truly generated energy, light, or radiation, it makes sense that only a select group trained in its handling would be allowed to go near it. The biblical rules are clear and chilling. No one outside the priesthood was permitted to touch, move, or even look upon the ark. When King David attempted to transport it on an open cart, one slip of the hand led to instant death. From that moment, he ordered it to be carried only by Levites using wooden poles. Those priests had to perform elaborate purification rituals before every contact: bathing, changing garments, fasting, abstaining from certain foods and acts. The text describes these as spiritual disciplines, yet the steps sound strikingly similar to decontamination procedures: cleansing the body, minimizing exposure, and wearing special garments that may have served more practical than symbolic purposes. Their robes, for instance, were woven with threads of gold, conductive material that could theoretically dissipate electrical charge. Over those garments, the high priest wore a breastplate inlaid with 12 stones, a device many scholars dismiss as decorative. But the ancient Hebrew word for it, hoshin, also implies a tool of consultation or communication. Some fringe historians have speculated it functioned as an early grounding plate or interface, connecting the priest to the ark safely Whether or not that's true, one thing is certain. Those who handled the ark treated it like something that could strike at any moment. The rituals of the Day of Atonement, the one day each year the high priest could enter the Holy of Holies, reveal just how cautious they were. He entered alone, barefoot, and in total silence, carrying incense to create a thick cloud between himself and the ark. That smoke may have symbolized prayer or served as insulation, reducing the direct exposure to whatever energy filled the room. A rope was tied around his ankle before he entered, so that if he died inside, others could pull him out without crossing the threshold. These are not the practices of blind faith. They are the behaviors of men who knew the danger was real. Legends passed down through rabbinic tradition speak of priests struck dead by the glory of the Lord, their bodies blackened or burned. Others tell of the ark emitting voices, flashes, and a blinding radiance when its cover was lifted. In modern terms, we might call that radiation. The Levites may not have understood the science behind it, but they clearly learned its rules. Keep your distance, shield yourself, follow protocol. Some texts even hint that the ark required regular tending, the rewrapping of its veils, the maintenance of its chamber, the recitation of specific chants before it was moved. To the faithful, these chants were prayers. To the skeptical, perhaps they were rhythmic sound patterns, vibrations meant to stabilize an energy field. In every detail, the ark behaves less like a passive relic and more like a machine requiring careful operation. Over time, the priesthood became a closed circle of knowledge. Their duties passed from father to son, generation after generation, with no outsiders permitted to learn the full process. This secrecy preserved not just the ark's sanctity, but its safety. The high priest acted almost like a technician, part scientist, part mystic, tending a device that could bless or obliterate. The Israelites believed God dwelt within that space between the cherubim. The priests may have understood that presence as something more literal, a field of power they could feel but not explain, and then one day it was gone. When the ark disappeared, so too did the Levitical line's purpose. Without the object they were trained to serve. Their knowledge faded into ritual, their instructions into myth. But what if that ancient secrecy wasn't lost, only hidden? What if, buried within the coded language of Levitical law, there remain clues about how the ark functioned, how it was maintained, and why only a chosen few could survive its proximity? The deeper you read, the more the old rules sound like warnings from an earlier age, a time when faith and science were one, when priests were engineers of the divine. Did the ancient Hebrews guard not a relic, but a reactor? The fall of Jericho is one of the most iconic miracles in the Bible, a story taught to children as proof of divine intervention, where faith alone brought down the walls of a mighty city. But what if that miracle was something else entirely? What if Jericho didn't fall through power, through prayer, but through power, a power no one could explain, hidden within the Ark of the Covenant itself? According to the book of Joshua, the Israelites marched around Jericho for 7 days. Each day they circled the city once, priests carrying the ark before them, its presence leading the procession like a living weapon. On the 7th day, they circled 7 times. Then, with a blast of trumpets and a collective shout, the walls collapsed flat to the ground. It sounds simple, but impossible. Archaeologists have puzzled for generations over how thick stone ramparts could crumble without siege engines or battering rams. Traditional believers see the event as a divine miracle. the direct intervention of God. But others, reading between the lines, suspect something stranger. The ark, always at the center of the story, may have played a role far beyond spiritual symbolism. Could it be that the Israelites were wielding an instrument of sound, frequency, or resonance, an ancient technology capable of destabilizing matter itself? To modern ears, that sounds like science fiction. Yet, the more we learn about vibration and frequency, the less far-fetched it becomes. Resonance, the natural frequency at which an object vibrates, can destroy structures when manipulated correctly. A bridge, for instance, can collapse if wind or sound matches its resonant frequency. What if the same principle applied at Jericho? The trumpets, the shouting, the marching, all timed, rhythmic, and ritualistic, might have been components of a resonant event, deliberately synchronized with the ark. The book of Joshua doesn't describe chaos, it describes precision. The number 7 repeats like a code. 7 priests, 7 trumpets, 7 circuits. The Israelites didn't attack, they performed an operation. And at the center of that operation stood the ark, the supposed throne of God, humming with energy, flanked by golden cherubim, whose wings might have functioned as acoustic reflectors or amplifiers. When the final horn sounded and the people shouted, perhaps they triggered something within the ark, a burst of energy or vibration that reverberated through the air, shaking the very foundations of Jericho. Ancient writers often describe the ark as producing sound, a low droning hum that accompanied its movement. Some scholars have dismissed this as poetic metaphor. Others suggest it might describe literal resonance, the kind produced by oscillating energy fields. Imagine an ancient device emitting powerful frequencies, invisible waves that could rattle stones apart. To the Israelites, it was the voice of God commanding the walls to fall. To us, it might look like a directed sonic weapon, a lost piece of technology rediscovered thousands of years too late. Excavations at Jericho have only deepened the mystery. Archaeologists found sections of the city's walls not toppled outward by siege, but collapsed inward, as if some internal force had destabilized them. Carbon dating suggests sudden destruction, not gradual decay. There are no signs of catapult stones, no burn marks from siege fire, no conventional explanation. For some, this confirms divine intervention. For others, it raises an even more fascinating possibility that the ark, an instrument of unknown energy, was used deliberately to demonstrate its might. Consider the psychological effect. The Israelites, newly freed slaves wandering through hostile lands, needed more than faith, they needed proof. The ark gave them that, a single event, a spectacular show of unstoppable power, would have cemented their belief that God was truly among them. And for the surrounding nations, Jericho's fall would serve as warning. Resist, and your walls will crumble without a fight. It was divine theater, or technological warfare disguised as a miracle. Of course, mainstream historians reject this idea. To them, the resonance theory is pseudo-archaeology, the product of imagination, not evidence. But the Bible's details resist easy dismissal. Why mention the horns, the repetition, the days of marching? Why include the ark so prominently in a story about sound? These details feel too deliberate to be coincidence. If Jericho was indeed destroyed through resonance, then the Israelites may have unknowingly harnessed a principle of physics far ahead of their time. The ark, constructed from gold and wood, materials known to conduct and insulate, could have acted as a massive resonator, amplifying the frequency generated by the horns and human voices. The result? Structural collapse through pure vibration. And if that's true, then Jericho wasn't simply the scene of a miracle, it was a demonstration, a terrifying revelation of what the ark could do when its full potential was unleashed. The people of that age called it the will of God. But maybe beneath the thunder of trumpets and the dust of falling walls, what they truly witnessed was the raw hum of ancient power, a frequency that once shook stone and may yet echo through history, waiting for someone to rediscover it. Long before Moses ever set foot on Mount Sinai, Egypt was already a land obsessed with light, not sunlight, but something else, something they called Sekhem, the power that radiates from the gods. In their hieroglyphs, light is not merely illumination, it is energy, force, divinity made visible. Among their most mysterious writings are fragments that speak of a shining chest, a box of radiance, carried in processions and sealed away in sanctuaries where only the high priests could enter. The descriptions sound eerily familiar. A sacred container built of gold, emitting an unbearable brilliance, guarded by priests who risked death upon contact. Yet these references come from centuries before the Hebrew Exodus. Could it be that the Egyptians already possessed something like the Ark, or perhaps the same object under another name? The theory begins with Moses himself. The book of Exodus calls him a Hebrew, but he was raised as Egyptian royalty, educated in their science, language, and mystery schools. As a young man, he would have known the rituals of the temples and the technologies the priests guarded so fiercely. When he later led the Israelites out of Egypt, it said he took with him not only his people, but knowledge, forbidden knowledge. If the ark's design truly came to him from a divine source, was that source the God of Israel, or the echo of something he had already seen in Pharaoh's house? Egyptian texts from the New Kingdom period mention an artifact known as the Shesepunk, the resplendent life box. It was kept in the temple of Ra at Heliopolis and said to contain the Bie, or living essence, of the sun god. Priests claimed it emitted rays that could kill the unworthy. Only those anointed with sacred oils could approach it. It was transported on poles, covered with veils and accompanied by chanting to stabilize its energy. No one was allowed to open it. The parallels to the Ark of the Covenant are uncanny, too precise to ignore. If the Ark and the Shesepunk were one and the same, or at least built on the same principle, it would explain much about Egypt's fury during the Exodus. The biblical plagues and the desperate pursuit across the Red Sea may have been about more than losing slaves. They may have been about losing power. Ancient Egyptian accounts do hint at a catastrophic loss of a divine object, a theft that caused chaos in the temples and darkness to cover the land. In that light, the Ark's exodus becomes not just a story of liberation, but of reclamation, one civilization stealing back a relic that once belonged to another. Some historians have gone further, suggesting that Moses' instructions for constructing the Ark mirror Egyptian temple, schematics too perfectly to be coincidence. The cherubim atop the Ark resemble the winged sun disk motif found above temple doors, symbolizing divine energy between twin guardians. The acacia wood used for the ark's frame grows abundantly along the Nile, and the ritual of carrying it on poles mirrors Egyptian processions of sacred chests dedicated to gods like Osiris and Amun. Perhaps the ark was not an invention at all, but a replication of something Moses had seen within Egypt's inner sanctums. If that's true, then the ark's power may have originated not from the Hebrew wilderness, but from the laboratories of Egypt's priesthood, a culture that blended religion with technology in ways we still don't understand. The Egyptians spoke of Heka, the science of divine power, and of Serket, a protective energy so intense it could repel death itself. They built devices we still can't fully explain. The Dendera light bulb reliefs, the precision stonework of the pyramids, the electrified copper vessels discovered in Saqqara. What if these weren't metaphors for the gods, but descriptions of a forgotten energy science, a fusion of engineering and spirituality that the Ark was part of? When Moses departed Egypt, he may have taken a prototype, or at least the knowledge to rebuild one. The Ark of the Covenant could then be seen as a continuation of Egypt's most dangerous secret, the ultimate Heka device. That would make it not only a holy relic, but a stolen weapon, one the Israelites reinterpreted as the dwelling of their god. Centuries later, Egyptian priests still wrote about the radiant box and the lost fire of Ra. One temple inscription from the reign of Ramses III warns of a chest of light that burns without flame. Another, found at Karnak, describes a sealed object that fell silent when stolen by the foreigners. These fragments suggest that the memory of such an object haunted Egypt long after it was gone. If the Ark truly was born in Egypt, then the Exodus was not just a flight from bondage, it was an act of technological rebellion. Moses didn't escape Pharaoh's wrath. He stole the one thing Pharaoh could not replace. And that changes everything, because if the Ark began as Egyptian science, its disappearance from their temples wasn't a coincidence, it was a cover-up. And the question that lingers isn't just where the Ark went, but what else did the pharaohs know and choose never to write down? In 586 BCE, the heart of Jerusalem burned. The air was thick with ash and smoke as the armies of Babylon, under King Nebuchadnezzar II, tore through the city's sacred walls. The Temple of Solomon, once glittering with gold and the songs of priests, was reduced to ruin. It was the single most catastrophic event in early Jewish history, and yet, amid the rubble and the blood, one absence eclipsed every loss: the Ark of the Covenant. The holiest object in the ancient world had vanished. The biblical account describes the destruction of the temple in detail. Babylonian soldiers looted the gold, the silver, and the bronze implements used for worship. They carried off treasures and captives alike. But there is one object they do not list: the Ark. The detailed inventory in the Book of Kings includes bowls, basins, and lampstands, yet no mention of the most sacred artifact of all. Historians have always found this omission suspicious. How could such a prize simply disappear from the record? Tradition says the Ark was lost, but lost implies accident, misplacement, or neglect. What if it wasn't lost at all? What if someone took it before the Babylonians ever reached the temple gates? Several ancient sources hint at a secret evacuation. The second book of Maccabees, written centuries later, claims that the prophet Jeremiah received a vision warning him of the coming invasion. He is said to have carried the Ark, along with the altar of incense, to a hidden cave somewhere in the mountains near the Dead Sea. There he sealed the entrance and declared that the location would remain unknown until God restored his people. The text reads like allegory, but its tone is unusually specific, the kind of detail that preserves memory disguised as myth. Archaeological surveys of the Judean wilderness have uncovered networks of tunnels and burial chambers dating back to that era. natural hiding places for something both holy and hazardous. If the ark was indeed removed, its keepers must have acted in desperation, knowing that if the Babylonians seized it, its power could be turned into a weapon. Some legends claim that priests disguised as refugees carried it under nightfall, using decoy chests to confuse pursuers. Others say it was lowered into one of Jerusalem's underground cisterns, beneath the Temple Mount itself, and sealed beneath new stonework once the Babylonians took control. The Babylonians, for their part, were obsessed with divine technology. Their own temples contained gods that shone like fire, and devices they called me, artifacts of power said to control weather, fertility, and warfare. If they had found the ark, they would have boasted of it, yet their records are silent. Nebuchadnezzar's chroniclers meticulously listed every treasure plundered from Judah, but not the ark. This silence may be the greatest clue of all. Either they never found it, or they did, and chose to keep its existence secret. Some scholars suggest that the ark may have been taken to Babylon in secrecy, hidden among the spoils meant for the king's palace. Babylonian inscriptions speak of a radiant chest brought from a conquered Western temple, locked away in the House of Succession. Later, the palace archives mention strange rituals conducted in sealed chambers involving light, vibration, and the burning of aromatic resins. It's possible that the ark, or a fragment of it, became part of Babylon's own cultic experiments, an object of study rather than worship. But then came Babylon's fall. When Cyrus of Persia conquered the empire a few decades later, he released the Jewish captives and allowed them to rebuild the temple. Yet, in their return records, no mention of the ark appears. It was gone, whether hidden, destroyed, or assimilated into another empire's secrets, no one knows. Some rabbis later claimed that the ark remained beneath the Temple Mount, untouched. Others insisted that the Babylonian priests who handled it died mysteriously, as if struck by divine fire. Every civilization that touched the ark seemed to suffer collapse soon after. Egypt, Philistia, now Babylon. Coincidence or curse? The pattern repeats with unsettling precision. Perhaps the priests of Jerusalem knew this, which is why they risked everything to move it beyond reach. Official history calls the ark lost to time. But history is written by those who inherit the ruins, not by those who hide what should never be found. Somewhere between the desert and the Tigris, between myth and empire, the trail of the ark fades, not because it ended, but because someone wanted it to. Historians say it was lost, but what if it was taken? When Jerusalem fell, the world should have known. The Babylonians chronicled every conquest, every treasure, every artifact worth its weight in gold. And yet, when the first temple was reduced to ash, the most sacred object ever crafted, the Ark of the Covenant, simply disappears. No record of destruction, no mention of capture, no evidence of survival. The holiest relic in Hebrew history, centerpiece of divine power for centuries, vanishes from the page of history as though it had never existed at all. That silence is the true mystery. Ancient conquerors celebrated their victories in exhaustive detail. Nebuchadnezzar's scribes inscribed inventories of the temple's treasures, vessels, lampstands, ornaments, down to the smallest silver cup. But the ark, the object that supposedly housed the presence of God himself, is conspicuously absent. It's as if the Babylonians never saw it, or perhaps, more chillingly, were never meant to. For centuries, scholars have wrestled with this gap. How could something so revered simply vanish without trace? The biblical texts that come after the Babylonian exile, Ezra, Nehemiah, Chronicles, describe the rebuilding of the temple, but never the return of the ark. The second temple contained a holy of holies, yet it stood empty. The most sacred space in Judaism became a void. The priests continued their rituals before a blank foundation stone where once lightning was said to dance between cherubim. That eerie absence became a kind of wound in history, a hole so cleanly cut it almost looks deliberate. One theory suggests the ark was hidden by temple priests before the siege. Ancient sources mention secret tunnels beneath Solomon's temple, passages carved into bedrock supposedly leading to ritual chambers and water cisterns. In 1911, explorers actually discovered a maze of such tunnels under the Temple Mount, some leading to sealed doorways that have never been opened. Could one of those chambers conceal what was spirited away in the city's final hours? The priests would have had motive, not just religious devotion, but survival. They knew the ark's power. They had seen what happened when it fell into foreign hands. And they would have understood that if Babylon's armies reached the inner sanctum, the outcome would be catastrophic for both the ark and whoever touched it. Another possibility is even stranger. The ark was removed long before the invasion. Certain rabbinic traditions suggest the prophet Jeremiah foresaw the city's doom and ordered the Levites to move the ark to a place of safety. A midrashic text describes how they carried it into a cave beneath Mount Nebo, the same mountain where Moses was said to have died. There, Jeremiah sealed it with a curse, declaring that it would remain hidden until the coming of the Messiah. For centuries, Jewish mystics have treated this as prophecy, not allegory. What lends these tales weight is their silence in official history. No one claimed to have destroyed the ark. No one claimed to have captured it. It's not even listed among the treasures of Solomon in Babylonian museums or tablets. For an empire obsessed with inventory, that omission feels intentional. Perhaps Nebuchadnezzar's scribes were ordered to erase it, or perhaps they recorded it elsewhere, in restricted archives meant for the king's eyes alone. There are whispers, too, of an event during the siege, that a great light rose from the temple just before it fell. Josephus, writing centuries later, mentions a brightness that seemed to flee from the sanctuary. It's an odd detail, easily dismissed as legend, unless it's describing something real. Could the ark have been moved, activated, or removed in a way that defied ordinary explanation? If the priests truly possessed a device of energy or resonance, its disappearance may have been less theft than containment, a deliberate effort to prevent it from falling into human hands ever again. What makes the mystery enduring is that the ark leaves no aftermath. No fragments, no ashes, no plundered inscription boasting of conquest. In every known case of ancient looting, treasures reappear somewhere, melted down, cataloged, or imitated. But the ark does not. Its absence is so absolute, it behaves less like a lost artifact and more like a redacted event, as if history itself was instructed to forget. For believers, that silence is divine, proof that God withdrew his presence from a fallen world. For skeptics, it's evidence of human intervention, priests, prophets, or even foreign agents removing something they couldn't explain. Either way, the effect is the same, a blank space in history where the most dangerous object on earth once stood. No looting list, no mention, no trace. It's as if the ark was never there at all. Or worse, that it was moved in secret by those who understood that the holiest things are not meant to be found, only hidden. When Jerusalem teetered on the brink of destruction, its streets ran with panic and prophecy. The city's defenders knew the Babylonians were coming, an army vast enough to blot out the horizon. But within the temple walls, another mission unfolded in secret. According to legend, a small band of Levitical priests and prophets gathered by torchlight beneath the sacred chambers, preparing to spirit away the most dangerous relic ever made, the Ark of the Covenant. If the Ark truly existed, if it was more than legend, it could not be left to the invaders. Every story that had ever surrounded it warned what happened when outsiders touched it. Those who tried to harness its power died where they stood. The priests believed the Ark was not just holy, it was lethal. And so, while Jerusalem above burned, they turned to the hidden world beneath their feet. For centuries, rumors have persisted of tunnels carved into the bedrock below the Temple Mount, secret chambers, water channels, and passageways stretching toward the Kidron Valley and beyond. In 1867, explorer Charles Warren descended into the area and discovered narrow shafts leading deep under the mount, some so tight that a man could barely crawl through. His team found ancient masonry, sealed doorways, and the faint remains of a subterranean road that once connected to the city's outer walls. The priests, it seems, had long known of these tunnels, perhaps even built them as escape routes for times of siege. It's easy to dismiss such stories as pious exaggeration, yet archaeology keeps whispering otherwise. Modern ground-penetrating radar surveys have confirmed voids beneath the Temple Mount, voids that align with biblical descriptions of the chambers beneath the sanctuary. One tunnel, discovered near the Gihon Spring, appears to lead toward the mount from the southeast, its purpose still uncertain. Local tradition calls it the priest's passage. Could this have been the route through which the ark was smuggled? According to apocryphal texts, the prophet Jeremiah played a central role in the plan. Having received visions of Jerusalem's fall, he ordered trusted Levites to remove the ark and sacred relics from the Holy of Holies. Some accounts say they transported it under cover of night, its golden form wrapped in hides and linen to muffle the sound. The men descended into the tunnels carrying oil lamps, walking through knee-deep water, guided only by memory and faith. Once outside the city, they may have followed the Kidron Ravine south toward the wilderness, and from there vanished into legend. Skeptics argue that no such escape could have occurred without record. Yet perhaps that is precisely the point. If the ark was as volatile as the priests believed, secrecy was survival. The fewer who knew, the safer it was. Even within the prophetic writings, Jeremiah's warnings become strangely guarded after the siege, as though he had seen too much and chosen silence over disclosure. Archaeologists working around the city of David have found collapsed passages and sealed chambers that might once have connected to the temple. In one case, a tunnel section was found blocked by massive stone slabs, carefully positioned rather than broken, a deliberate act of closure. Nearby inscriptions speak of hidden vessels of the Lord buried before the enemy of the north arrived. To most historians, that phrase is poetic, but to those who chase the ark's trail, it reads like a clue left by desperate men. Still, the evidence refuses to tip one way or the other. For every stone that seems to whisper truth, there is silence to match it. No golden fragments, no inscriptions naming the ark, no definitive trace. And yet, those who have explored the area describe an uneasy feeling, a sense of pressure, as though the earth itself guards its secret. The tunnels beneath Jerusalem are more than history. They're a labyrinth of faith, fear, and forbidden knowledge. Legend says Jeremiah sealed the ark in a cavern lined with salt and limestone, where its power would be neutralized until the appointed time. When later generations sought it, the entrance could no longer be found. Some say it collapsed naturally. Others whisper that the priests themselves destroyed the map. So archaeology digs downward, while legend spirals inward. One seeks evidence, the other truth. But in Jerusalem, those two things are rarely the same. The deeper one searches, the more the city seems to guard its mysteries with silence and stone. Did the priests succeed? Did the prophet's escape route carry the ark beyond reach? No one knows. All we have are tunnels that lead into darkness, and the uneasy sense that somewhere beneath the city, beneath the prayers and the politics and the centuries of dust, something still waits, untouched. Far from Jerusalem, beyond deserts and seas, a legend has endured for nearly 3,000 years, one that claims the Ark of the Covenant was never lost at all. It was taken deliberately and divinely to the highlands of Ethiopia. There, in a city called Axum, the Ark is said to rest even now, guarded by men who will die before revealing its presence. To most of the world, it's a myth. To Ethiopians, it's history. The story comes from the Kebra Nagast, the national epic of Ethiopia, written in the 14th century, but rooted in oral traditions far older. It tells of a meeting between King Solomon of Israel and the Queen of Sheba, a ruler from the kingdom of Saba, an empire scholars now link to ancient Ethiopia and Yemen. Their encounter, as the Kebra Nagast records, was more than diplomatic. The queen returned home carrying Solomon's child, a son named Menelik. Years later, grown and curious about his father, Menelik journeyed to Jerusalem. There, Solomon welcomed him as his blood, and the two spent months together in the splendor of the first temple. But when Menelik prepared to return to his mother's land, something extraordinary happened, or so the legend says. According to the Kebra Nagast, a group of priests loyal to Menelik secretly removed the ark from the Holy of Holies and replaced it with an identical replica. They claimed an angel had visited them in a dream, commanding that the ark be carried to a land where its power would be safe, a place beyond the corruption of kings and conquerors. Menelik, unaware at first, discovered the theft only after the caravan was far into the wilderness. But when he prayed for guidance, a pillar of light appeared leading him southward, a sign that God approved. When Solomon realized what had happened, he was torn between rage and awe. The ark, he said, had gone where God willed it to go. It's a story drenched in mystery and symbolism, yet it refuses to die. Ethiopian Orthodox Christians believe the ark, the real ark, has remained in Axum ever since, housed within a small chapel beside the Church of St. Mary of Zion. Only one man, the appointed guardian of the ark, may see it. He never leaves the compound. He speaks to no one outside the church. When he dies, another monk is chosen to take his place. For centuries, travelers have reported strange phenomena near the chapel. Sudden flashes of light during storms, humming sounds in the air, even heat radiating from the stone walls at night. European explorers who visited Axum in the 19th and 20th centuries were fascinated and frustrated. When they requested to see the relic, they were politely refused. Cameras, drawings, even proximity were forbidden. Yet some claimed to have glimpsed a golden chest covered by heavy cloth during processions, carried on wooden poles, just as the Bible describes. Others spoke of monks suffering from sores and blindness after years of service near the chapel, as though exposed to an unseen energy. These accounts remain anecdotal, impossible to verify, impossible to dismiss. Critics argue that the Kebra Nagast is mythology. an attempt by Ethiopia's early Christian rulers to connect their lineage to Solomon and the divine heritage of Israel, but there are details that defy simple invention. The Kebra Nagast describes the ark's construction and rituals with uncanny accuracy, details that would have been nearly impossible for medieval writers in Africa to know without direct transmission. Moreover, Ethiopian religious practice retains elements unlike any other branch of Christianity: a deep reverence for the Old Testament, priests carrying replicas of the ark known as tablets during festivals, and the belief that God's dwelling still resides physically among them. Modern researchers, including British journalist Graham Hancock, have tried to trace the ark's supposed journey. Some point to trade routes between Jerusalem and the Red Sea, to ships sailing from Etzion Geber to the Horn of Africa. Others cite inscriptions and artifacts linking ancient Israel to the kingdom of Sheba. Each clue feels tantalizing, incomplete, like the edge of a map whose center remains forbidden. If the ark truly resides in Axum, then it has survived wars, invasions, and centuries of isolation. It has outlived empires and watched the world forget its power. And perhaps that's exactly why it endures, because it was hidden not in heaven but on earth, among those humble enough to guard it and wise enough never to open it. Is the world's holiest object still hidden in plain sight? Maybe. Or maybe it was never hidden at all, only protected from those who wouldn't believe it unless it destroyed them first. At the heart of Axum, Ethiopia, stands a compound so ordinary in appearance that most visitors would walk past without noticing. The outer walls are modest, the courtyard quiet, the air heavy with incense and age. Yet inside, behind layers of stone, iron, and silence, the monks of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church claim to protect the most powerful artifact in human history, the Ark of the Covenant. They call it Tabet Zion, the Ark of Zion, and they say it has never left this ground for nearly 3,000 years. The Ark, according to local belief, rests inside a small chapel beside the ancient church of St. Mary of Zion, a structure rebuilt multiple times over the centuries, but always on the same sacred foundation. It's not grand or gilded like European cathedrals. Its walls are rough, its windows barred, its roof patched with sheet metal, but its simplicity hides something far stranger. No one, not even the patriarch of the Ethiopian church, may enter the inner sanctum where the ark resides. Only one man, the appointed guardian of the ark, is allowed to see it, and once chosen, he never leaves the compound for the rest of his life. Visitors who come to Axum often describe an atmosphere of reverent fear. The guardian, an elderly monk draped in white, rarely speaks. He lives in a small hut beside the chapel, sustaining himself on prayer and silence. The locals say that those who have tried to look upon the ark without permission, even accidentally, have been struck blind or dead within days. Whether superstition or something else, the warning is absolute. The ark does not forgive curiosity. Photographs are forbidden, no cameras, no sketches, no measurements. Even high-ranking officials who've attempted to verify the claim have been politely but firmly denied. In the 1940s, Emperor Haile Selassie commissioned a new chapel to be built to protect the relic. He personally oversaw its construction, yet even he never entered the holy chamber. When the chapel was complete, the ark was reportedly transferred under a shroud during a moonless night carried by chanting monks, while the entire city kept vigil in silence. No one outside that circle has seen it since. Why such secrecy? The monks explain that the ark is too sacred, too dangerous. But beneath their devotion, there's something deeper: fear. Travelers who linger near the chapel at night speak of strange phenomena: a low humming, flashes of blue-white light flickering through the cracks, a sensation of static in the air that makes hair stand on end. Locals tell of lightning striking the compound repeatedly during storms, always in the same spot, never causing damage. Some scientists attribute it to electromagnetic anomalies, yet no instruments are allowed to test it. It would be easy to dismiss these claims if not for the consistency with which they've been repeated over generations. The monks' rules are absolute. No outsiders, no verification, no exceptions. The guardian himself is chosen through prayer and divine lot, and when he dies, another is selected, often a novice who claims to have heard the ark's call in his dreams. Once chosen, his life ends in isolation. He may speak only to those who bring him food and water. His purpose is singular, to guard the ark with his life. The last few guardians have all died mysteriously, some of sudden illness, others from unexplained burns or fevers. Their funerals are small, their names seldom recorded. The new guardian simply steps into the role, and the cycle continues. It has for centuries. To the world, the secrecy makes the claim unverifiable. To the faithful, it makes it true. Because if the ark really is here, if it truly contains a force beyond comprehension, then its survival depends on the silence of those who protect it. One guardian at a time. No cameras, no proof. Why? Because perhaps deep down they believe the same thing the ancients once feared, that the moment the ark is seen, the world will change forever. Those who have tried to uncover the truth of the Axum ark often come back changed, or not at all. Over the last century, a handful of outsiders have claimed to witness evidence that something extraordinary lies within the chapel. Their testimonies are fragmented, scattered across books, diaries, and whispered interviews, but together they paint a picture that is as compelling as it is terrifying. In the 1940s, British soldiers stationed in Ethiopia during the East African Campaign reported seeing a glow around the chapel during night patrols. One officer wrote in his field notes, "It was like the air itself was burning." Another claimed his compass spun wildly near the compound's gate, though the skies were clear and still. Locals shrugged. "It does that sometimes," they said, as though this invisible disturbance were an accepted part of life. In 1992, during a period of civil unrest, a journalist named Nicholas Merriman was granted rare access to the monastery courtyard. He was not permitted inside the chapel, but as he stood by its outer wall, he described feeling a pressure, a vibration, like standing next to an engine. His Geiger counter, brought discreetly in his satchel, reportedly began to tick, its needle climbing, before the battery died. When he tried to publish his findings, his editor pulled the story without explanation. Then there are the monks themselves. Some former clergy who lived near the Guardian have spoken cautiously about the toll it takes on those who serve too close. Their skin changes, one said. Their eyes water and their hands shake. They grow sick and old very fast. Radiation sickness, malnutrition, or simply the burden of spiritual devotion? No one can say. The church denies any danger. The Guardian's cell remains sealed. Western researchers who've approached the site face a wall of silence. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church considers the Ark not a historical artifact, but a living embodiment of God, and to question it is blasphemy. Still, private expeditions have tried. Each time they meet obstacles. Government restrictions, sudden travel bans, missing permits, mysterious power cuts, even the disappearance of equipment. It's as if some invisible hand ensures no one gets too close. Even satellite imagery is curiously incomplete. Mapping data of Axum Center blurs the chapel grounds. Some say it's coincidence, others whisper that the interference comes from something beneath the earth, something still active. Locals tell stories of birds dropping from the sky when they perch on the chapel roof, of livestock refusing to cross its shadow. The faithful see miracles in these tales. Scientists see anomalies they're not allowed to measure. The few who have attempted clandestine studies often find their careers ruined. One archaeologist who published a paper comparing the ark's effects to electromagnetic discharge was quietly dismissed from his university. Another, who claimed to have seen classified Vatican correspondence about Axum, retracted his statements a month later and disappeared from public view. Perhaps the most haunting account comes from a young monk who left the monastery in the 1970s. He claimed that during a lightning storm, the guardian called him inside for help. The ark was uncovered, he said, and the light filled the room like the sun. He awoke hours later outside, unable to remember how he'd gotten there. His hair had turned white. Spiritual energy or ancient technology? The question divides believers and skeptics alike. But one fact unites them. Something within that chapel exerts a power that no one dares to confront directly. If it's faith, it's the most enduring faith on earth. If it's technology, it's the oldest still functioning. Either way, the silence around Axum may not be ignorance, it may be containment. Officially, the Vatican takes no position on the Ark of the Covenant's location. Unofficially, its shadow looms large over every attempt to investigate Axum. For centuries, the Holy See has maintained diplomatic and religious ties with Ethiopia, and yet, every time the subject of the Ark arises, those ties grow curiously tense. Why? What could one of the world's most powerful religious institutions fear or protect? Historical records show that Catholic emissaries first visited Axum in the 15th century. Jesuit missionaries, hoping to unify the Ethiopian church under Rome, wrote of a golden chest sealed from human eyes. One report, sent to Pope Clement VII, described a mysterious heat emanating from the chapel. Soon after, correspondents from the Vatican warned missionaries to avoid the topic altogether. Their archives contain the note, "Concerning the object of Zion, to question is forbidden." Centuries later, the Vatican's interest reignited during the 1930s Italian occupation of Ethiopia. Benito Mussolini, obsessed with imperial glory, claimed he would return the treasures of Solomon to Rome. Vatican advisors publicly dismissed the idea, yet classified diplomatic cables reveal quiet concern. A priest assigned to the Italian expedition later wrote in his memoirs that two Vatican scholars were embedded with Mussolini's forces under the guise of cultural consultants. Their mission to verify whether the relic in Axum could truly be the Ark. After the invasion failed, both men were recalled. Their personal papers have never been released. More recently, in 1999, the Patriarch of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church visited the Vatican. Among the delegation's agenda items, none listed publicly, was a private audience regarding sacred artifacts. Within days, Vatican Radio abruptly aired a segment denying that the Ark of the Covenant existed anywhere on Earth. The timing was too perfect to ignore. Why issue a denial to a question no one had asked? Researchers who've tried to access Vatican archives on the subject encounter locked doors. Files related to Ethiopia, ecclesiastical correspondence, 1935-1945, are sealed. Requests under scholarly credentials receive polite refusals. One theologian who studied the Church's secret inventory of relics claims that several entries are redacted with the single Latin word periculosum, dangerous. Yet the Vatican's silence seems to acknowledge knowledge. They know enough to deny carefully, but never conclusively. Why? Perhaps the Church fears that confirming the Ark's existence would unravel centuries of theological authority. If a device or relic of unimaginable power truly lies in Axum, untouched, unmediated by Rome, it represents divine access outside their control, a living covenant beyond Vatican walls. Rumors persist of quiet pilgrimages made by high-ranking Catholic officials. Locals in Axum recall European priests arriving under diplomatic cover, escorted discreetly into the compound, only to emerge pale, shaken, and silent. Some believe these visits were sanctioned to verify the Ark's authenticity. Others suspect they were meant to ensure it stayed buried in obscurity. The Church's official explanation remains simple. The Ark is a symbol of faith, not a physical object. Yet, its actions tell another story, one of curiosity veiled as caution and secrecy mistaken for sanctity. Each denial, each sealed file, seems less like skepticism and more like fear. Because if the Ark truly rests in Ethiopia, radiating power, guarded by monks who need no papal blessing, then it stands as proof that divine authority does not belong to any institution, but to those who keep it hidden. Why would the Vatican care unless they already know? In 1119 CE, 9 knights arrived in Jerusalem under a vow of poverty, chastity, and service to God. They called themselves the Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon, soon to be known simply as the Knights Templar. On paper, their mission was modest, to protect pilgrims traveling the dangerous roads to the Holy Land. But almost immediately after their founding, something curious happened. Instead of guarding roads, the Templars began digging. Their headquarters was granted to them by King Baldwin II. The Al-Aqsa Mosque, built on the ruins of the ancient Temple Mount, the very site where Solomon's temple once stood. History records that for nearly a decade, these knights conducted mysterious excavations beneath the mount, rarely emerging, rarely fighting, and refusing to speak of what they were doing. Officially, they were clearing stables. Unofficially, they were searching for something buried long before the Crusades, long before Christendom itself. The location was no accident. The Temple Mount was the biblical resting place of the Ark of the Covenant for the Templars, warrior monks obsessed with the fusion of faith and power. That legend would have been irresistible. Rumors soon spread among other crusaders that the Templars were tunneling through ancient passages, following Hebrew inscriptions and hidden chambers. Local laborers who helped them told of vast caverns beneath the mount filled with dust and strange artifacts. After 9 years, the knights abruptly ceased their digging and emerged transformed, richer, more confident, and suddenly protected by the highest authorities in Christendom. What did they find beneath the temple? No official record says, but within a year of their return, the Templars received papal recognition, exemption from taxes, and the unprecedented right to cross borders freely. Their fortunes rose so quickly, it defied explanation. It was as if they had returned not just with relics, but with knowledge, something that made kings defer and popes obey. Some chroniclers claim they discovered ancient scrolls, possibly documents written by Solomon's priests, describing the Ark's design or even its last resting place. Others believe they uncovered the Ark itself, or a fragment of it, hidden in a subterranean vault since the Babylonian conquest. In 1867, British explorers following Templar records rediscovered tunnels beneath the Temple Mount, that matched the medieval descriptions. Among the debris were artifacts of Crusader origin, pickaxes, lanterns, and tools. They had been there. Whatever they found, they left the site immediately afterward, as if aware that it was dangerous or forbidden. Some say the Templars removed the relics and smuggled them back to Europe, hiding them within their growing network of preceptories. Others claim they reburied them beneath Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland, a place later carved with unmistakable Hebrew motifs and angelic figures resembling cherubim. The Templar seal itself, 2 knights riding a single horse, has been interpreted as symbolism: one faith, 2 powers, spiritual and material, united by something discovered in Jerusalem. The church never confirmed what the Templars found, but within decades their influence rivaled the papacy itself. Their sudden rise, their secret archives, and their obsession with sacred geometry all trace back to those 9 silent years beneath the mount. Perhaps they found the Ark. Perhaps they found something worse: its blueprint. Some say they found it and never gave it back. The rise of the Templars defies every economic and political pattern of the medieval world. 9 knights with no land, no wealth, and no army became, within a generation, the most powerful organization in Christendom. They invented international banking, funded kings, and built cathedrals with architectural precision centuries ahead of their time. Historians attribute their success to discipline and divine favor, but the timing suggests something more. Their knowledge expanded too fast, their designs too perfect, their reach too sudden. It was as if they'd unlocked a secret from the past, a fragment of lost technology. After their excavations beneath the Temple Mount, the Templars began constructing fortresses and churches across Europe and the Holy Land, each one aligned with geometric precision. Many of their buildings are positioned along specific ley lines, ancient paths of magnetic and energetic significance, according to both folklore and modern mapping. Their use of sacred geometry mirrored that of the ancient Egyptians and Israelites, dimensions that encoded numerical relationships found in the Ark's own biblical measurements. Coincidence or continuation? Some researchers believe the Templars uncovered documents or schematics relating to the Ark, blueprints of a divine machine capable of channeling energy or frequency. If so, their subsequent actions make sense. They founded the first organized archives of esoteric knowledge, blending theology with early science, architecture, and astronomy. Their cathedrals were not just churches, they were resonant chambers, stone instruments designed to manipulate light and sound. The Gothic arch, which first appeared in Templar architecture, concentrates vibrations upward, echoing the idea of the Ark as a conduit between heaven and earth. There are even whispers that the Templars experimented with substances that produced radiant light. Chronicles from the 12th century mention lamps that burned without fuel in Templar commanderies. In one account, a knight describes a holy fire kept in vessels of gold that illuminated the dark without consuming. Historians dismiss this as metaphorical language, but its echo of the Ark's fire of God is unmistakable. As their power grew, so did the church's suspicion. The Templars' secret rituals, their guarded symbols, twin pillars, the rose cross, the eye within light, all hinted at a hidden theology. Their initiation oaths included confessions whispered before a mysterious object, sometimes called Baphomet. Could this head have been a relic of the Ark or device derived from it? Contemporary reports describe it as shining, even speaking. To the Church, it was heresy. To the Templars, it was revelation. When King Philip IV of France and Pope Clement XI turned against them in 1307, and the arrests were sudden, brutal, and synchronized. But even in defeat, the Templars acted as though they had expected it. Their vaults were empty. Their ships, laden with treasure, vanished from the port of La Rochelle days before the raids. Whatever knowledge or relics they had discovered beneath the Temple Mount, they took it with them. Their technological and financial legacy endured long after. The Templars pioneered banking systems that prefigured modern credit, as though understanding abstract value in a way no one else did. They seemed to grasp intuitively the idea of invisible power, whether spiritual, energetic, or economic, harnessed and directed through structure and secrecy. Coincidence, perhaps, but their transformation from paupers to global influencers suggests something beyond luck. They began their order digging beneath the ruins of Solomon's temple and emerged as masters of knowledge that altered the medieval world. What did they find down there? Gold, scrolls, or the instructions for something divine and dangerous? Coincidence or possession of the Ark's secrets? When the Templars fell, their enemies rejoiced, but their victory was incomplete. On October 13, 1307, the French king's soldiers raided every Templar stronghold in Europe. Yet in the days leading up to the purge, eyewitnesses reported frantic activity at the port of La Rochelle, where a dozen Templar ships had been anchored. On the morning of the arrests, the fleet was gone, vanished into fog, carrying with it the last remnants of the order's fortune, and perhaps something far older. Where did the Templar fleet go? Official history offers only silence. Some say the ships fled to Portugal, where King Denis sheltered surviving knights. Others insist they sailed north, beyond the reach of Europe's monarchs, to Scotland, then excommunicated, lawless and free. There, under the protection of the Sinclair family, the Templars are said to have found refuge and secrecy. Rosslyn Chapel, built 2 centuries later by William Sinclair, intricate carvings adorn the stone. Among them are depictions of what appear to be the Ark's cherubim, side by side with Mesoamerican plants unknown to Europe at the time, maize and aloe. Historians call it coincidence or artistic license. But to those tracing the Ark's shadow, Rosslyn is no mere church. It's a code. The chapel's foundation sits on an intersection of magnetic anomalies, and deep beneath it lies a sealed crypt no one has ever opened. Local lore claims the Templars buried a great treasure of light there, a relic brought from Jerusalem to safeguard humanity from its own ambition. Yet Scotland may not have been the end of the journey. From its northern shores, centuries later, stories began to circulate of a mysterious voyage across the Atlantic. Before Columbus, before maps of the New World, ships bearing the Templar cross were reportedly seen off the coasts of Nova Scotia. Indigenous legends speak of white-robed men who came from the east, carrying a shining box that sang like thunder. These stories are dismissed by mainstream scholars, but they mirror another mystery: Oak Island. Off Nova Scotia's coast, a small cursed island has yielded evidence of complex tunnels, stone chambers, and strange wooden platforms buried deep underground. A labyrinth that seems centuries older than European colonization. Among the many theories about what lies at its bottom, one stands out that the Templar treasure, or a relic linked to the Ark, was hidden there. Some accounts even describe fragments of carved gold and parchment recovered before flooding halted the dig. None have been verified, yet the pattern echoes the Templar method: concealment through engineering, protection through secrecy, If the Ark or its blueprints truly passed into Templar hands, hiding it would have been essential. The church would have destroyed it, and kings would have weaponized it by smuggling it into exile, first to Scotland, then perhaps across the ocean. The Templars may have ensured its survival. It would explain the persistent myths of secret societies preserving ancient light, from the Freemasons to the Rosicrucians, all tracing lineage back to the same order that once dug beneath Solomon's temple. When Rosslyn Chapel's crypt was scanned in the 1990s, researchers detected large metallic objects within sealed stone chambers. Excavation was denied by the Scottish authorities at the request of the local church. Officially, the contents remain unknown. Unofficially, some believe the Ark rests there still, encased in silence and legend. Others say it was moved long ago, hidden beneath the earth of a new world, where no empire could reach. The Templars disappeared, but their shadow never did. Every few decades, the world rediscovers their symbols, their geometry, their whispers of lost power. Perhaps it's all coincidence. Or perhaps those 9 knights who once dug beneath the Temple Mount carried away not gold, but the greatest secret ever buried. Was the Ark part of the treasure the Templars hid forever? In the years leading up to World War II, Germany's obsession with the supernatural became state policy. Heinrich Himmler, head of the SS and one of Hitler's closest confidants, created a secret organization known as the Ahnenerbe, the Ancestral Heritage Research and Teaching Society. Its stated goal was to uncover the origins of the Aryan race. Its hidden purpose was far stranger: to locate and recover objects of immense, possibly supernatural power. At the top of their list, the Ark of the Covenant. Hitler believed the Ark was real, and more importantly, that it was a weapon. He saw it not as a religious symbol, but as a lost technology, a tool of divine energy that could be repurposed for domination. Himmler shared that vision and funded dozens of expeditions across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East, searching for what Nazi scientists called God machines. The Ahnenerbe's files, recovered after the war, reveal chilling details. In 1936, a team led by archaeologist Otto Rahn, later infamous for his studies on the Holy Grail, was sent to the Middle East under orders to trace the relic of Sinai. Their route led them through Egypt, Jerusalem, and Ethiopia. British intelligence intercepted reports of German operatives posing as researchers near Aksum, attempting to meet with the Ethiopian Orthodox clergy. But the timing was disastrous. Italy invaded Ethiopia that same year, and the region descended into chaos. Still, Rahn returned to Berlin with crates labeled temple documents. Their contents have never been disclosed. In parallel, SS engineers began experimenting with devices modeled on biblical descriptions of the Ark. They attempted to recreate its design: gold plating, insulated core, twin terminals, believing it could generate high-voltage discharges or even direct energy. Declassified Allied reports mention a Nazi project nicknamed Die Donnerkiste, the Box of Thunder. Tests conducted at secret facilities in Bavaria allegedly resulted in fatal electrical phenomena and unexplained burns among technicians. To the Nazi leadership, these deaths only confirmed the Ark's power. Hitler reportedly remarked during a private meeting, Moses was the first to wield the energy of creation. If the Ark could level cities, as the Bible claimed, then replicating it could grant Germany a weapon beyond imagination. But the deeper the SS delved, the more erratic their experiments became. Witnesses described objects glowing, instruments failing, and staff collapsing from unseen forces. The Ahnenerbe's own scientists began to suspect that whatever the ark represented, it was not just physical energy, it was something that reacted to consciousness, faith, or fear itself. They called it Gottesstrahlung, the radiation of God. When the Allies entered Germany in 1945, many Ahnenerbe archives were destroyed, yet a handful of recovered documents referred to an operation codenamed Jericho. It referenced an object of resonance transported from France to southern Germany for testing and later moved again before the war's end. American intelligence traced those shipments but never found what they contained. Some claim the crates were recovered by U.S. forces and quietly transferred to a base in Nevada. Others insist they were taken east into the hands of the Soviets. If Hitler truly believed the Ark could be rebuilt, then perhaps his quest was never about faith at all. It was about physics. The same man who sought control over every aspect of life also sought the power of divine destruction. And though the war ended, the research did not. Hitler believed the Ark was a weapon and tried to rebuild it. When the Third Reich collapsed, its scientists didn't vanish, they changed sides. Operation Paperclip brought hundreds of German researchers to America, while others were absorbed into Soviet programs. Among their confiscated materials were blueprints, field notes, and theoretical papers describing energy resonance, psychotronic charge, and devices modeled after ancient temple technology. To the public, these ideas were pseudoscience. To the Cold War superpowers, they were potential weapons. In 1953, declassified CIA memos described anomalous research derived from recovered Nazi archives. The language was careful but unmistakable. Both the US and the USSR were investigating high-voltage containment systems inspired by biblical and Near Eastern texts. One internal code name appeared repeatedly: Project Arclight. Project Arclight, according to surviving fragments, aimed to reproduce the Ark's effects through electrical and acoustic resonance. Engineers built prototypes, gold-plated boxes lined with insulating materials, connected to high-frequency generators. When powered, these devices emitted intense electromagnetic fields. Test animals placed nearby showed agitation, then collapse. Human trials were never acknowledged, though rumors persist of soldiers experiencing neurological trauma after exposure. At the same time, Soviet scientists were conducting parallel research under Program Radiant Dome. KGB reports described efforts to weaponize what they called electrogravitic harmonics, a phrase eerily close to ancient notions of divine vibration. In 1961, one experiment in a remote Siberian lab reportedly caused a power surge so strong it blacked out the entire facility. Survivors described an audible hum, a pressure in the air, and then blinding light, the same details found in biblical and medieval Ark accounts. Both sides denied any connection to religious mythology. Officially, these were energy experiments. Unofficially, their goals were clear: harness what ancient texts called the presence. One American physicist later admitted, "We didn't believe in God, we just wanted his machine." As the arms race escalated, fragments of this research leaked into other classified programs. The Pentagon's Operation Blue Book briefly explored radiant field anomalies in the 1960s. NASA engineers studying space radiation referenced Hebraic containment analogies. Soviet scientists at Arzamas 16 conducted resonance experiments that some historians now recognize as primitive plasma field tests, nearly identical to the Ark's hypothesized behavior. When declassified documents emerged decades later, they revealed something disturbing. Both nations had independently attempted to power their prototypes using uranium. The results were catastrophic. Containment failures, electrical arcs, and radiation exposure mirrored the wrath described in Scripture, as if history itself were repeating. By the 1980s, both powers abandoned direct experiments. The surviving data was locked away, classified above top secret, yet whispers persisted of a residual field generator tested in the Nevada desert, a box that glowed from within when exposed to certain frequencies. A Soviet defector later claimed that the KGB had built its own Ark replica in an underground facility near Lake Baikal, guarded night and day, sealed after a fatal incident in which the object sang. Religion meets weaponization, faith transmuted into science, myth rewritten as military doctrine. The Ark had become a blueprint for the ultimate deterrent, a fusion of mysticism and physics that blurred the line between miracle and machine. And though the Cold War ended, both superpowers kept their silence. What they found or built may still lie in the vaults of forgotten laboratories, humming faintly in the dark. To most people today, the Ark of the Covenant is cinematic fantasy, an icon of adventure immortalized by Indiana Jones. In popular imagination, it's a relic of mystery, not menace, something that melts Nazis and then disappears conveniently into a government warehouse. But what if that image, the humor, the spectacle, was deliberate? What if turning the Ark into entertainment was the perfect way to hide its truth in plain sight? Since the release of Raiders of the Lost Ark in 1981, public fascination with the Ark has exploded. Yet real-world investigations into its whereabouts have dwindled. The movie gave the world a mythic ending. The Ark hidden in a U.S. storage facility, cataloged and forgotten. Ironically, declassified files from that very decade confirm that the American military was indeed studying ancient energy containment systems. Coincidence or clever camouflage? Hollywood's version softened the fear. It replaced radiation with wrath, energy with divine punishment. By turning the Ark into a story, the world stopped asking if it might be real. Yet intelligence documents tell a different story. From Nazi archives to Cold War black projects, the Ark keeps reappearing in classified contexts, always described in technical, not theological terms. Even the Vatican's public dismissal of the Axum relic in the late 20th century coincided suspiciously with renewed Western research into non-nuclear directed energy. In 2003, following the U.S. invasion of Iraq, reports emerged of American soldiers guarding ancient sites, including one described as a sealed subterranean chamber near Babylon containing metallic relics. The Pentagon denied everything, but leaked memos referred to resonant containment units. Some journalists speculated these might be remnants of Ark-based experiments or artifacts linked to the same ancient technology. Within months, the story vanished from headlines. Meanwhile, movies, TV shows, and novels multiplied, each retelling the Ark myth with more spectacle and less seriousness. As one media theorist wrote, the more we laugh at the Ark, the less we look for it. Governments, it seems, had learned the value of ridicule as camouflage. But beneath the fiction, patterns persist. A surprising number of engineers, physicists, and military historians cite the Ark's structure as inspiration for real experiments in resonance and charge containment. Its design, gold conductor, wood insulator, twin terminals, is now recognized as an efficient electrical capacitor. To the ancients, that might have seemed divine. To modern science, it's almost elegant in its simplicity. So, where does the line blur between faith and fear, myth and mechanism? The arc of pop culture is sanitized, a relic of imagination. The arc of history, though, the one that keeps resurfacing in classified archives, in burned out temples, in forbidden chapels, still defies explanation. If the world's governments have studied it, perhaps they reached the same conclusion Moses did on Sinai, that power of such magnitude cannot be owned, only guarded. Maybe that's why every official story ends with the same refrain: no proof. Maybe proof is precisely what they're protecting us from, because what if the ark isn't gone and never was? What if it sits somewhere deep beneath the earth, humming quietly while the world forgets? Why do they keep making us laugh about something they take so seriously? When the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered in the caves of Qumran in 1947, they rewrote history. Ancient texts, some more than 2,000 years old, offered glimpses into forgotten faiths and secret sects. But among the brittle papyrus and parchment fragments, one stood apart, a scroll not made of skin but of copper. Unlike the others, it wasn't a prayer or prophecy. It was a list of hidden treasures. Etched into thin sheets of metal, the copper scroll describes 64 caches of gold, silver, and sacred objects buried in the land of Israel. It mentions specific locations: wells, cisterns, tombs, and weights so vast they defy imagination. Scholars initially dismissed it as myth, but what caught the attention of biblical archaeologists wasn't the treasure itself. It was a phrase repeated several times: the vessels of the temple. One passage refers to a chest of pure gold, hidden under the steps in the valley of Ashur. Another describes a hollow in the rock containing the altar and the measure of the ark. That word, ark, sent shockwaves through the academic world. Could the copper scroll be a coded inventory of temple relics hidden before the Babylonian conquest? If so, the Ark of the Covenant might not have been destroyed or lost. It might have been buried deliberately, its location encoded in the scroll's cryptic Hebrew numerology. Unlike other Dead Sea texts, the copper scroll doesn't read like allegory. It's pragmatic, almost bureaucratic. Directions are precise, measurements are consistent. This is not poetry, it's instruction. Some experts, like archaeologist John Allegro, believe the scroll was written by priests fleeing Jerusalem around 586 BCE, the same era when the Ark disappeared. Allegro spent years trying to decode its coordinates, convinced the vessels were real. His colleagues ridiculed him, his funding was cut, and his reputation destroyed. Yet even after his death, excavations around Qumran and the Judean wilderness continued to reveal man-made tunnels, sealed crypts, and evidence of ancient concealment. Modern researchers using 3D mapping have found voids beneath some of the copper scrolls, describe sites, cavities consistent with hidden chambers. But all major digs were halted abruptly by regional authorities, often citing security concerns. Israel's Antiquities Authority now limits exploration in areas associated with the scroll's clues. Officially, they fear collapse or looting. Unofficially, some suspect the reason runs deeper. Why does a 2,000-year-old document describing temple vessels remain so tightly controlled? And why does every attempt to translate its final lines end in controversy? Some scholars claim the scroll ends with a riddle. The final treasure is in the place of the name. In Hebrew tradition, the name refers to God himself and by extension to his dwelling. That could mean the Temple Mount, it could mean the Holy of Holies, or it could mean something still undiscovered. Is one of those vessels the ark listed by code? If the copper scroll truly holds the coordinates of the ark, then perhaps it was never lost to time. Perhaps it was hidden according to plan, protected by generations who understood its danger. The map may have survived, but the world isn't ready for what it leads to. Beneath the heart of Jerusalem lies a labyrinth of stone and secrecy. Archaeologists have long believed that remnants of Solomon's temple, and possibly the ark's hiding place, still lie buried under the Temple Mount, but digging there is almost impossible, not because it's dangerous, though it is, but because it's forbidden. Since the 1960s, every major excavation beneath the Mount has been stopped or restricted by governments, religious authorities, or sudden structural concerns. Officially, the ban exists to protect the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock, two of Islam's holiest sites. But the pattern of suppression began long before political tensions reached their peak. Even early British expeditions, like those of Charles Warren in the 19th century, reported mysterious blockages, sealed tunnels, bricked chambers, and officials who ordered them to stop just as they neared something significant. Modern archaeologists whisper about the dig that never was, a classified excavation rumored to have taken place in 1981 under the guise of maintenance work. Several Israeli workers claimed they broke into an ancient tunnel leading toward the foundation stone, the legendary floor of the Holy of Holies. Within days, the site was shut down by the military and all records vanished. The official statement, no findings of importance. But the workers told a different story. Strange inscriptions, scorched rock, and a chamber that vibrated with what one described as the sound of wind trapped in stone. Even the most conservative scholars admit that something lies beneath the mount, something old, deliberate, and sealed. Yet any attempt to explore is met with near universal resistance. Both Israeli and Palestinian authorities forbid excavation. Religious leaders from 3 faiths oppose disturbance of the site. Archaeology, it seems, has run headlong into politics and perhaps into something older than both. Why ban archaeology under the Temple Mount if nothing's there? Satellite imaging reveals underground anomalies, geometric voids beneath the southern retaining wall, and a vast cavity directly beneath the dome. Laser scanning has identified a tunnel extending from the mount toward the city of David, matching descriptions of the priest's passage from apocryphal texts. But when researchers requested permission to study it, their access was revoked without explanation. The Temple Mount Sifting Project, created to examine debris removed from unauthorized excavations, found shards of gold leaf, marble fragments, and artifacts dating to Solomon's time. Yet none of this material has been publicly displayed. The official narrative remains unchanged. There is nothing beneath. Perhaps that's the greatest irony, that in a city built upon faith, truth itself has become forbidden ground. Every religion that claims Jerusalem fears what might be found below it, because proof changes power, and the Ark, if ever rediscovered, would redefine both faith and history. History is supposed to belong to the brave, to those who ask questions and chase evidence. But when it comes to the Ark of the Covenant, curiosity can be fatal to a career. Over the last century, countless researchers have found their work buried, their reputations destroyed, and their discoveries erased. It's not always violence that silences truth. Sometimes it's bureaucracy. Take the case of Professor Michael Sanders, who in the 1990s announced he had located the Ark's resting place using biblical coordinates and satellite imaging. His research pointed to a site near Qumran, the same region mentioned in the Copper Scroll. Within weeks, funding was cut, excavation permits withdrawn, and his university distanced itself publicly. Sanders vanished from academia. His colleagues later described his findings as too controversial for institutional support, or considered Dr. Lean Rittmeyer, an architectural historian who published drawings of the First Temple's foundation. His proposal that a hollow beneath the foundation stone could hide a sealed chamber was met not with debate, but with condemnation. He was barred from further fieldwork in Jerusalem, and his research quietly removed from government archives. Even within religious institutions, censorship persists. Monks, priests, and scholars who speak openly about the Ark risk excommunication or discreditation. One Ethiopian abbot who hinted at scientific tests being conducted near the Axum Chapel died suddenly weeks later, heart failure officially. But witnesses recall black-suited visitors from Europe days before his death. In the modern era, whistleblowers from intelligence agencies have added another layer to the mystery. A leaked memo from the 1980s referenced archaeological containment directives, instructing governments to suppress discoveries that could destabilize theological or political equilibrium. The Ark was listed by name. The reasoning was simple. Whoever controlled the narrative of the Ark controlled the world's most powerful symbol or its most dangerous machine. Independent researchers, stripped of credentials, continue their work quietly. Some have gone underground, literally using robotics and remote sensors to probe forbidden zones. Others release findings anonymously, fearing retaliation. One anonymous archaeologist, writing under the pseudonym Eliakim, published photographs of what appeared to be gold-plated fragments from a sealed Jerusalem chamber. Within months, his website disappeared, his domain erased, and his identity traced to a European research institution. The university denies he ever existed. Coincidence or containment? The deeper the mystery runs, the clearer the pattern becomes. Every attempt to reveal the Ark's truth ends in silence. Government cite secura. Religious bodies preach humility. Academia claims skepticism, but together, their denials form a wall stronger than stone, a collective decision to protect something the world isn't ready to face. Who decides what history we're allowed to know? If the Ark is real, if its power can still be felt, then perhaps suppression isn't conspiracy, but survival. After all, some knowledge doesn't enlighten, it consumes. For centuries, the Ark of the Covenant has been described in language of reverence, fire, light, divine presence. But when stripped of theology and viewed through a scientific lens, its design begins to look less like a holy relic and more like a machine. The Bible gives exact specifications: a wooden chest of acacia, overlaid inside and out with pure gold, topped with 2 golden cherubim whose wings nearly touch. Between them, the presence of God was said to appear in a radiant glow. Gold is one of the best electrical conductors known. Wood, particularly acacia, is an excellent insulator. Combine the two, and you have the basic components of a capacitor, a device capable of storing and releasing electrical energy. The dimensions of the Ark, roughly 4 feet long, 2.5 feet wide, and 2.5 feet high, would give it a substantial charge capacity. If the cherubim atop acted as terminals, even a simple static buildup could discharge violently when touched. That alone could explain the biblical accounts of men struck dead for merely laying hands upon it. Was the Ark, then, an ancient electrical capacitor, a divine battery thousands of years before science caught up? Researchers from the early 20th century, like engineer Nikola Tesla and later physicist R.A. Schwaller de Lubitsch, speculated that ancient civilizations possessed an intuitive understanding of electromagnetic phenomena. They pointed to descriptions of glory, lightning, and fire from between the wings as signs of plasma discharge, ionized air glowing under voltage. The ark may have accumulated energy through friction or perhaps through the natural electromagnetic field of the earth itself. When priests approached it wearing linen garments, natural fiber, anti-static, they may have unknowingly grounded its charge, releasing blinding arcs of electricity. The biblical instructions to carry the ark on wooden poles suddenly make practical sense. If it generated static or radiative energy, touching it directly would have been fatal. The ark's inner chamber, the Holy of Holies, may have been lined with conductive materials that amplified the effect. Ancient texts even warn that incense should be burned nearby, possibly to ionize the air and stabilize the energy field. Skeptics dismiss this as coincidence, but the precision of the description defies chance. The ark's layered design, gold, wood, gold, mirrors the modern construction of electrical capacitors and Faraday cages. Even the cherubim's outstretched wings could have functioned as electrodes, focusing electrical discharge toward the center, the mercy seat where God was said to dwell. If this theory holds, the ark's voice of God may have been the hum or vibration of electricity, its brilliance the flash of plasma discharge. Those who approached untrained would die from electrical shock or radiation, interpreted by ancient observers as divine wrath. A divine battery, thousands of years before science caught up. Maybe the ancients didn't invent electricity. Maybe they discovered it and learned to worship it. Sound, vibration, frequency. To the ancients, these were not metaphors, but forces, the literal mechanisms of creation. And God said, "Let there be light." The universe began, they believed, with vibration. Some modern researchers now wonder, could the Ark of the Covenant have been built not just to store energy, but to amplify it through sound? The resonance hypothesis suggests that the Ark functioned as an acoustic chamber, designed to harness harmonic frequencies capable of interacting with matter itself. Its size and shape, when modeled in modern acoustic simulations, show resonant frequencies in the range of 111, 120 VROs. Low, deep tones known to cause physical vibration in objects. If the priest chanting before the ark hit these frequencies during rituals, the sound could have amplified within the chamber, creating standing waves that produced real, physical effects, even levitation. In ancient temples, sound was sacred. The walls of Egyptian sanctuaries, the domes of Sumerian ziggurats, and even the design of Jerusalem's temple all reflect acoustic awareness. They were not just places of worship, they were machines of resonance. Some researchers believe the ark acted as the core oscillator within such systems, a portable heart of vibration that could bridge the gap between the physical and the divine. Biblical passages describe the ark's presence, accompanied by thunder, earthquakes, and trembling ground. Could this have been resonance-induced vibration? When carried into battle, the ark's very movement might have created oscillations that disoriented enemies. The fall of Jericho, long described as divine intervention, could thus be a demonstration of frequency resonance, shattering brittle stone walls, the same principle used in modern acoustic demolition. But resonance doesn't stop at sound. Physicists now know that every atom vibrates at a natural frequency. If the ark generated electromagnetic fields as well, then coupling those fields with specific sound frequencies might have produced anti-gravity or plasma resonance effects, phenomena we're only beginning to understand. Faith meets physics here, and neither wins cleanly. Religion calls it the voice of God, science calls it harmonics. Both describe the same experience. Sound is power, vibration as creation. In the ark's presence, people fell to the ground, overcome with awe and fear. Maybe they weren't just praying. Maybe they were being affected by resonant waves, unseen, but felt in the bones. To the priests, this was communion. To a scientist, it was resonance. To both, it was contact with something larger than themselves. If the ark was a machine, a capacitor, a resonator, a weapon, then one question looms larger than all others. Who built it? Was Moses, an exiled shepherd, truly capable of designing such a device from divine blueprints? Or was he given instructions from something or someone beyond his understanding? Ancient astronaut theorists argue that the ark may not have been of human origin. They point to parallels between biblical descriptions of the ark and ancient accounts of sky chariots, fire wheels, and voices from the heavens. In each, the divine is described as luminous, mechanical, and impossibly powerful, as if the gods of antiquity were not spirits but visitors. When Moses ascended Mount Sinai, he was said to enter a cloud of smoke and thunder, a phenomenon eerily similar to modern reports of electromagnetic storms or plasma events. He remained there 40 days, receiving instructions from the voice within the fire. The blueprints for the ark came directly from this encounter. If we reframe the event as a technological contact, the ark becomes less a relic of worship and more a communication device, a transceiver built to maintain connection with something not of this earth. Biblical accounts of the ark's behavior further support the theory. It emitted radiation-like effects, glowed with unnatural light, and was capable of causing burns and illness. When carried before armies, it scattered enemies and consumed with fire. To ancient minds, this was divine power. To modern ones, it sounds like directed energy or advanced technology repurposed without full comprehension. Some interpretations suggest the ark's cherubim acted as antennas, focusing energy upward, perhaps even transmitting signals. The ark's presence in sacred rituals could then have been less about worship and more about maintaining contact with those who first delivered its design. Across multiple cultures, Sumerian, Egyptian, Mayan, similar stories describe objects of gold and fire that spoke to the heavens. Were these relics fragments of a shared alien technology distributed among early civilizations? Mainstream historians reject the notion, yet the consistency of description is hard to ignore. The same motifs, glowing chests, radiant beings, forbidden power, appear worldwide. If these accounts refer to the same class of technology, then the ark might have been one of many, a component of an extraterrestrial network guiding early human development. Was God's voice something else entirely? Maybe the ark was both divine and technological, a bridge between the sacred and the scientific, delivered to humanity before it was ready to understand. To call it alien may be too narrow. Perhaps it was simply other. Behind the marble walls of the Vatican lies a labyrinth no one outside the church has fully seen. The Vatican secret. Archives, now politely renamed the Apostolic Archive, stretch for nearly 85 kilometers beneath Rome. Officially, it holds the correspondence of popes and documents of church history. Unofficially, it is whispered to guard something else entirely, proof of the Ark's survival. Over the decades, leaks and testimonies from former clergy have painted a picture of restricted vaults, areas even senior cardinals cannot access without papal consent. Files marked periculosum, dangerous, reportedly detail anomalous relics recovered throughout history. Among them, one inventory from the 15th century references fragments of the covenant chest wrapped and sealed. No such document appears in public catalogs. Requests for access by scholars are routinely denied, sometimes with the vague explanation that the material endangers faith. In 1948, following the turmoil of World War II, Pope Pius XIII quietly ordered a survey of biblical relics and artifacts of divine manifestation. Some believe this was part of an internal project to assess discoveries made by Allied forces in the Middle East. Classified U.S. Army records mention crates sent to Rome labeled Religious Antiquities, Jerusalem Sector. Their contents remain undisclosed. Vatican spokesmen insist no such transfers occurred, yet the timing aligns with Allied control over former Nazi dig sites, including those linked to Operation Jericho, the German search for the Ark. Across the Atlantic, the United States has its own sealed chambers, underground repositories at Fort Meade, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and the Smithsonian Institution. Declassified correspondence between the CIA and the Smithsonian in the 1950s references energy artifacts of Near Eastern origin, later reclassified as non-biological hazards. One memo simply reads, "Refer to archetype containment protocols." Are these coincidences or fragments of a hidden continuity between church and state? Some researchers believe a quiet alliance exists, one that began when the Vatican and Western intelligence agreed that certain discoveries should remain secret for the stability of civilization. The logic is chilling but simple. If the Ark's existence were proven, every religion, every government built on faith or skepticism alike would be forced to reckon with a power beyond control. There are even whispers of photographs, grainy black and white images taken by Vatican technicians in the 1930s, showing what appears to be a gilded chest emitting faint luminescence. The negatives, reportedly sealed in lead-lined containers, have never been released. When asked, Vatican archivists reply, "No such images exist." There are photos, but no one is allowed to see them, perhaps because the truth once seen cannot be forgotten. Throughout history, those who sought the Ark were not dreamers, they were rulers. Pharaohs, kings, popes, and generals have all understood one truth: whoever controls belief controls the world. The Ark, whether as relic or metaphor, has always been the ultimate prize, the fusion of faith and force, of heaven and weapon. If the Ark is real, and if fragments of it or its knowledge survive, then its influence may still echo in the corridors of global power. Consider how the same patterns repeat across centuries: secret orders, alliances between religion and state, sudden technological leaps with no clear origin. What if these aren't coincidences but echoes? The remnants of a single thread of knowledge passed from one era's elites to the next. The Vatican's silence, the Smithsonian's sealed crates, the military's energy containment files, each suggests an understanding too dangerous for public eyes. Nations wage wars for oil, gold, and data. But what if the greatest resource of all is power itself, the literal, physical energy that ancient texts described as the glory of God? Rumors persist of modern institutions, think tanks, scientific committees, intelligence agencies, whose real purpose is to monitor signs of resonant activity. sudden spikes in unexplained electromagnetic radiation, strange light phenomena over historical sites, pilgrimages rerouted or restricted for security. Each act of censorship hides behind bureaucracy, yet each feels deliberate. Faith has always been the most efficient form of control, but faith tethered to proof, that is revolution. Imagine if one government could prove divine power exists and that it can be harnessed. Every religion, every ideology, every geopolitical boundary would crumble overnight. Control over such knowledge would define global dominance. And so, the Ark's legacy persists not in temples but in treaties, unwritten agreements to preserve secrecy, political manipulation cloaked in holiness, spiritual hunger redirected into obedience. The Ark's power may no longer glow from golden cherubim, but from the invisible networks of influence that decide what we can believe and what we cannot. The story of the Ark isn't over. It's simply gone corporate. Faith, power, manipulation, all still orbit the same object, unseen yet central. In the end, all stories of the Ark converge on the same silence, a blank space where history should speak, but doesn't. Every religion claims to know what the Ark was. Every skeptic claims to know what it wasn't. Yet no one can explain why it continues to haunt us, appearing in every era, vanishing just before proof arrives. Maybe that's the point. Maybe the Ark was never meant to be found. Across millennia, it has appeared as both miracle and menace, a weapon, a transmitter, a covenant, a curse. But beneath every theory lies one simple truth. The Ark responds to humanity. In ages of faith, it is a vessel of divine presence. In ages of science, it becomes technology. In ages of fear, it becomes myth. It is whatever we are, ready to believe. But what if the Ark is not lost at all? What if it's waiting, dormant, hidden, sealed away by those who understood that the world was not ready, the priests of Solomon, the monks of Aksum, the agents of governments, all custodians of a secret too vast to wield? Maybe they were never protecting it from us. Maybe they were protecting us from it. Modern humanity teeters between enlightenment and self-destruction. We split the atom, bend space, and digitize our souls, yet we still fear the thunder that once rolled from between two golden wings. Perhaps the Ark is the mirror we cannot face, a reflection of our obsession with power. And when it reappears, as legend promises it will, what then? Will it save humanity or end it? Some say the Ark will return when mankind rediscovers the language of light. Others whisper that it never left, that it pulses quietly beneath the earth under cathedrals or deserts, awaiting the one who can unlock it without falling to dust. Maybe the Ark is a test, not a treasure, a question, not an answer. And perhaps that question still waits for us. Are we ready to touch the divine and survive it?